It only took 110 episodes, but here we are, finally talking some sharks. This week's episode features New York Times best-selling author of The Meg, Steve Alten. We also have Captain Steve of the Bucket of Chum podcast joining us to talk Jaws, The Meg, and other sharks. So happy Shark Week to all who celebrate. And now sit back and take a bite out of episode number 110 of the Red River Horror Podcast. Welcome back. It's episode number 110 of the Red River Horror Podcast. It is a shark special this week. It is also going to be Shark Week when this episode debuts. And we have with us the author of the MEG series, Steve Alten.
Recording
Steve,
in progress.
thank you so much for joining us today. And we also have from the Bucket of Chum podcast, Captain Steve Coates. So thank you for also joining us. So we have Steve and Steve here, and we're going to talk some sharks. I'm your host, Joe Zakrzewski, joined as always by RedRiverHorror.com founder, Eddie Caiazzo. Ed, how are you today?
Joe, I'm doing great. Are you excited? We're finally talking about sharks.
I am pumped. So ever since our first episode when we were teasing having a podcast for the website, I did a poll because I really wanted to start with Jaws because we started in August of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up doing Sleepaway Camp instead.
Yep.
100-something episodes later, we are here, and we're going to talk Jaws, The Meg, and other shark movies. So, to get into it, once again, thank you for joining us. Eddie, you got anything before we get going?
I do. I have a question because we have a guest right now who's from Philadelphia. This is kind of exciting. Steve Alten, welcome. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I just want to thank you for joining us. And it's funny to me, like now the Meg came out.
I have a Sixers shirt on. How about that?
I love it.
He is rocking the Sixers shirt.
But I should be Eagles and Phils, but they were in the hamper. So
No, I get it. The Phils you should be wearing a lot because they're pretty hot right now. But I don't want to jinx it. I'm not gonna say.
Yeah, don't.
Yeah, we're not.
Don't jinx it right now.
But
well, unless your name's Howard Eskin, I think you're all right. Oops.
Whoopsie.
Whatever. He did that to himself. So
Yeah. On that note, so just New York Times best-selling author. When you came up with the Meg, I'm just curious. What was the genesis of that? As far as like, were you always interested in sharks? Was it something you saw on TV, stories you read as a kid? What made you choose the megalodon as kind of like this is a story I want to write about?
I think when I was 15, I saw Jaws, the movie, and then I read the book, and I also was kind of hooked on sharks at that point. I wanted to read everything I could about real life attacks. And so I used to sit in the library for, hours on end and just read everything they had about sharks. And there was always usually you could find a black and white photo of 6 guys, nerdy looking scientists sitting in a jaw, which was disproportionately made, we know now. But still, that's what Megalodon looked like. But there was never anything commercially written about it, nothing other than that photo. And so fast forward 20 years, I'm 35 years old. Funny because I'm writing this part of Meg Legacy, these 7-volume set that we're selling, is that I included an autobiography in there, which I never had any intention of writing. But now that I'm going back and all these memories are coming up, I'm actually writing about this part I'm telling you about. When I was 35, I was married, a family of 3 to support, struggling. I just closed the business. And in Time magazine arrives August 14th, 1995, and on the front covers an anglerfish. And the highlighted articles were about Mariana Trench, hydrothermal vents, and this 1,500-mile long unexplored gorge 7 miles down at the bottom of the Western Pacific. And when I read that, my first thought was, what's that big shark's name? That would be a really cool story if this was still alive inhabiting the Mariana Trench because of all these hydrothermal vents and things. So I went to the library because we had no internet back then, and the library happened to be across the street from me. I spent the afternoon there looking up stuff that might make a good story. Things like the migration pattern of whales, whether there was anything I could find on the Mariana Trench. Not much on MEGs, but that would come from me, translating or transferring great white shark information into a MEG, just extrapolating it out. And I decided that I was going to do it, which meant because I had a job at JOB, it just over broke during the day and evenings. The only time I could work on this is at 10 o'clock at night when I got home from work, till 3 in the morning and on weekends, on the dining room table with an old word processor, to which my wife was not very happy.
Oh, man.
But a MEG was written, and then I went out and was lucky enough to find an agent, and there's some really crazy things happening after that.
Yeah, I'll say. I mean, now it's into a movie. Now and they made a sequel to it. No, it's just fascinating to me. But it's funny you said, the genesis of that was your interest in the Jaws movie, the Jaws book. I honestly, just same with Alien. I didn't know Jaws was a book before it was a movie. But that brings me to Captain Steve Coates. Now, Bucket of Chum podcast, like that's your whole deal. Like you've kind of committed the entire space to watching all of the Sharks movies that have come across. So what was, and you had, we were speaking a little bit offline beforehand. You said, you went to film school. What was the, I guess, would your start have been the same? Was it Jaws that did it for you and made you that interested in shark movies, or was it something else?
Oh, it was 100% Jaws. I mean, I think it's the same story as everybody, right? Like I saw it when I was probably too young and was terrified to go into the lake for the longest time because I thought there'd be a shark in there. But then I was also just fascinated at the same time and, wanted to learn all about them. And then, of course, Deep Blue Sea came out. And I mean, that just really hooked me in. So, and I mean, I've always been a fan of those movies. And then it hasn't been until more recent years, the last 10 years or so, I've realized they make so many weird shark related movies that are just pure nonsense. And so I'm just this would make a really interesting podcast because there's so many of them out there that people don't even know about. It's just really interesting to see what people have done with it. So, yeah.
Very cool.
So, Joe, I just wanted to get that out of the way because, yes, you wanted that to be, and we put the Twitter poll up there in Sleepaway Camp 1, but you wanted that to be the subject of the first Red River Horror podcast, and I'm just different from all you guys in that I did not see Jaws until my son was born.
Yeah.
It was free on Tubi at the time.
Yeah, you're a little behind, but there is something special when you see Jaws at that, whether you saw it when it first came out or if you saw it at a young age, the way it has that impact on those little primal fears that exist inside you. Like Steve Coates said, going into a lake, suddenly there's sharks everywhere. They're even at the deep end of a pool.
Right.
After you watch Jaws. They're all over the place. And then also the fun of what Steve Alten does with the MEG coming out of the Mariana Trench, which was at that time when the book came out was, just a place of fascination. And now how much more of it's been discovered since then is just mind-blowing. How far we've come in, 20 years?
Yeah.
So 20, 30, almost
25,
30? Yeah.
almost, yeah.
So
yeah, we're getting old, Joe.
No, we're not.
Well, I actually have an interesting story about that when things started happening, about the hydrothermal vents and stuff. MEG, the book, the hardback came out in 1997. And I had done an interview. My first real interview after the book deal was made was in, I think it was October 1996, with a guy who was doing an article for the LA Times. Well, he was the one who put down the quote, 2 words, Jurassic Shark. And Doubleday, the publisher, used that, and the publisher who had done Jaws 23 years earlier, used that as the entire back quote, Jurassic Shark. And the new book review editor at the LA Times, Steve Alten, was pissed off about it. Now, none of us knew this, but so when MEG comes out the hardback, he takes an advanced reading copy and he gives it to this guy named Richard Ellis, who's like, he paints and he writes books about creatures and stuff like that, nonfiction. And the guy's job was to slay me, to rip me apart because he was pissed off at what trouble they did. Now, I didn't know this. So he, instead of doing a review, he does a hatchet job on me. All these, reciting all these errors and stuff. This is all going to be part of my memoir. It's all going to be in there. But the things he said, he trashed me. And I wrote a book of fiction. I shouldn't have to prove whether hydrothermal vents exist in the Mariana Trench. But don't tell me they don't, because they don't. If you go down there and you explore and you don't find any, then that's fine. I accept that as science. But everything else is bullshit. Because prior to 1977, scientists believed that there was no life at the bottom of the ocean. Sorry about the noise here.
No, you're okay. You said prior to 1977, there was, pretty much just like
because it was dark. Without light, you don't have photosynthesis.
Mm-hmm.
So scientists didn't know of any other life forms that existed on something other than photosynthesis. Until we went down in the Alvin submersible and found these huge communities of tube worms and bacteria coming out of the hydrothermal vents, creating this whole food chain, a chemosynthetic food chain based upon chemicals in the water. And suddenly now we knew what was down there because we went and looked. So don't tell me that there's no hydrothermal vents in the Mariana Trench because you, Richard Ellis, made that decision. So he slayed me. I was so pissed off that I wrote a retort, sent it to the LA Times. Wasserman calls me up and he says, I'm going to print your review, but I'm going to give it to him too. So he prints my response, and then he prints Ellis's response right behind it. And we're going back 3 times. And he's ripping me apart for all these things. Nowhere in Alten's universe, except in Alten's universe, does warm water exist below cold water. What are you talking about? Third grade science?
But the MEG is a novel. Am I correct? So
he's like, I'm writing a dissertation. And all the mistakes that he cited were all based upon the advanced reading copy, which is an unedited manuscript. It says right on the cover, all the problems were, all the mistakes were cleared up for the book. So, but what happened was how I got started on this topic. In between the time that now and when the book came out in '97, over the next 10 years, scientists actually went down there and found the hydrothermal vents, and we've found sharks that glow in the water, bioluminescent sharks. And almost everything that I mentioned, hydrothermal plumes, almost everything in MEG actually is real, proven a decade later. So I demanded an apology, but he died 2 weeks earlier, so.
Well, of course, because that's how it's going to go. You never got the apology that was rightfully deserved.
You don't think that that stuff is going to excuse you from,
Yeah.
on behalf of the LA Times, who wants to respond?
Yeah, somebody. It's one of those things that's really fascinating because just giant creatures that could live in the deep. So, like, giant squids were one that always popped in my head, but that comes from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which was one that I loved when I was younger. And then with the MEG, the Megalodon, I mean, that's an unfair critique, I guess, because it came out 5 years after the Jurassic Park movie and about 8 years after the Jurassic Park book. So, I mean, that's grasping at straws to do a comparison, but I mean, I thought the MEG has a more unique, as an individual tone that's not the same as Jurassic Park. So I don't see how that's an unfair assessment.
No, but I guess to bring it to Captain Steve from the Bucket of Chum podcast, you're someone that has observed, shark films of all, from the Spielberg Jaws all the way up to something like the MEG. do you think that would it? Do you think it's fair, I guess, to critique these films or stories, like whether they're scientifically accurate or not? Or do you think that, a story is just a story and it's entertaining, it's whatever's going to catch? Like do you think it's fair to hold someone who's written a novel to account for something that may be scientifically incorrect at that time? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a novel. Like, that's absolutely ridiculous to try to hold somebody accountable for that. Like Steve said, like, he's not writing a dissertation. It's a book. It's a story. It's an adventure. That would be like going to Michael Bay and complaining that the Transformers movies are not realistic enough. Like that. Like, that's how ridiculous that is. It's like, why would you do that? Like, that's just somebody who's looking to start a fight. They're just like, I want to argue about something, so I'm going to pick this to argue about. But no, like, shark movies, as long as you properly educate yourself on how sharks actually are and how they're not as dangerous as, like, a lot of movies seem to portray them as, then that's fine. And you have to understand, like, you're watching a movie, it's for entertainment value. You're reading a book, it's for entertainment value. You're not trying to educate yourself on that subject matter by reading a fictional story. If you want to educate yourself on it, then you go and read a science book. Don't go to the, like, fiction section and try to read something to try to, learn different worldviews. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, you got to go read the science books for that shit.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's about having fun, and I sure have a lot of fun watching any kind of shark film. And I'm gonna save it for later once we start talking more shark movies. But going on, that's really cool that we have the legacy pack, like legacy collection, we could say, of the Meg novels. And then, so the original hardback came out in '97, was published in '97, and then it didn't get made into a film until 2018 was the release date of the Meg the movie. How involved were you, Steve, with going through that whole process? Like, was that one of those productions that got held up for years and years and years and then finally happened, or how?
It went through its own hell and took me with it for most of it. And that's what Legacy's, my autobiography, Legacy really is about, because while you start off, you're reading the first novel, and then you're reading a novella that I wrote in between, and then you're reading the second novel, and then there's another novella, and then but the whole time I'm with you as far as a biography, telling you what's going on behind the scenes. Like, most people didn't realize that we actually had a movie deal with Disney's Hollywood Pictures in, I believe it was June of 1996, before the book was even purchased.
Oh, wow.
So what that did was it put a lot of heat on the sale of the book. And so my manager at the time, Ken Atchity, started a bidding war for MEG among the 6 biggest publishing houses in New York, because they already had signed a movie deal. So the final book deal was $2.1 million book deal, which is, from my first book. So it's kind of crazy. But then, I looked like it was a whole rags to riches story they were playing. But then the roller coaster went up, and then it went down, and it came down pretty hard. So all these things are going on in the autobiography while you're reading the book, so it gives it a little different kind of feel. Because we lost the second book deal, Hollywood Pictures, Disney's president of Hollywood Pictures, David Vogel, was fired. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it had to do with MEG, because the guy who negotiated the deal for us took over as the head of the studio at Warner Brothers. And the first thing he did was to attack Vogel, is he greenlit Deep Blue Sea.
Huh.
It was never supposed to be greenlit.
Wow.
It was some guy's shelf. But he greenlit it to try to get it out before before MEG. So there's a whole backstory to all this stuff.
And ultimately it did, if I'm not mistaken. MEG was distributed by Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
Wow.
And in between that, we had another option. When Hollywood Pictures returned the option, when they put it in revision, about 5 years went by, and a friend of mine, Nick Nunziato, who used to own, get his website, I'll think of it in a second. But Nick was a great fan and a good guy, and he took it to the guys at Hellboy, uh, Guillermo del Toro,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lloyd Levin, who had just done Hellboy, and said this is now available. This was years after Disney turned it down. So now we had New Line Cinema attached to the project, and that was just a major, major problem because of the things that were going on there. So everything has a backstory, and it's usually some kind of roller coaster ride.
Now, Deep Blue Sea, Steve Coates, you said that was, that was one of your, forays, just kind of your love for shark films. When I finally saw that very, very late. But so when Deep Blue Sea came out, it was like this action-packed type flick, right? It was.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a huge summer sale. Like, LL Cool J had a song and a music video for it.
Right.
The promo was heavy. I forget how many fast food restaurants had promos going with it. It was one of those. It's like, you're gonna go see this movie this summer because we're telling you.
Huh. Interesting. I'm just curious about your love for that film. What was it about it that you're just like, this is like, so Jaws, I'm in. Deep Blue Sea, I'm in.
I like that it's different. It's not the same movie. And Rennie Harlan, when he set out to make the movie, he's like, I want to see the shark as much as humanly possible, because in Jaws we don't see the shark, which works for the movie because it makes it really scary, but wasn't the original intention. Like, we were supposed to see that shark a hell of a lot more, but we didn't because the shark wasn't working, which is why they have a whole documentary entitled "The Shark Isn't Working." But with this movie, I think they used a really good mix of CGI and practical effects, because I'm a huge fan of using practical effects whenever you can. I understand that's not really the nature in Hollywood nowadays, but I mean, back then that still very much was, using animatronics and whatnot. So it was a good mix, and it was a good line between action and horror, because the original script was supposed to be more like military action, high-tech gadgets, and things like that, but they kind of toned it down a little bit, and then kind of mimicked Alien a little bit, because we just basically have a blue-collar crew, alone on a station, blah, blah, blah. But I think they just did it really well. And I mean, as a kid, like, just seeing people torn apart by sharks is just entertaining as hell, right? So I mean, of course, 10-year-old me is going to be all over that.
No, it makes sense. And Steve Alten, with the Meg, were you happy with the angle that when they decided to make it into a film? Are you happy that it turned into like an action-packed, Jason Statham led type film, or do you think, or would you have gone a different way?
No, I think they did a great job. I mean, the sale of the book to the Chinese production company Gravity was based on a script that Belle Avery and I had written. Belle Avery was lead producer, and a friend of mine who she optioned MEG and Lock for me. And so we had the best script. There was no doubt about it. If they ever make ours, good hands, heads above everything. But they did a great job, and they only changed a few things. And I thought the first one was really well done.
Okay. What kind of a budget are we looking at to make the script you're talking about? How much would that cost in your mind?
Probably about the same as the first one cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see that working.
I can give you the exact figure, but
Steve Coates, what do you think? What do you think is a good budget for a shark movie film? Now, you've kind of seen the whole spectrum of them. I guess I don't know if you've ever been asked this before, but what would be a good, like, something you say, okay, this was made on 10 million, this was made on 500,000, this was made on 25 million, like that. What's to make a good shark movie, like Hollywood, like, what do you think the perfect budget would be?
I don't think there's a number for the perfect budget. I think the issue is knowing where to use your money, because I see so many movies where they're spending so much time on other CGI shots that, like, we don't need, that don't like move the story forward or anything. So, or they're spending it on a lot of big actors, which sometimes we don't need. So I think a really good movie is when you can't tell what the budget was, and then you learn sometime later that it's like, wow, this was really done for like nothing. And then, but you're not even questioning it while you're watching it, or just using it in a way that's very effective and entertaining. So like, I just did a review for a movie called Graveyard Shark. Absolutely ridiculous, independent company that did it. And I had an absolute blast watching it because they used their money towards like a practical monster suit, practical blood. I think there were maybe 2 CGI shots in the whole movie. So like, they used their budget accordingly, and I think that's what you need to do with your movie. You need to spend the money on like shark design and things like that. And if you can't afford to show it a lot, then you need to craft your story around not being able to see it and then trying to build up tension. Or if you're going to like go really weird, like we see with the Polonia brothers, where they do like Virus Shark and Jurassic Shark and Land Shark, all those wild movies, just go super weird with it, go crazy, and have fun. Because if they're having fun, it translates to me, and then now I'm having fun because I know they had fun making it, so it just kind of translates to me. So I don't think there's really like a perfect budget area, but I mean, it's just all in how you use it, really.
So don't ever tell me that the perfect answer doesn't exist, because we just got one from Captain Steve Coates regarding shark movies, because that's dead on when it comes to budgeting. It's something we've definitely learned talking to independent filmmakers is like, the more you can get those practical effects in, the better. Now, on a side, like, not to get too off track with budgets and such, but another big budget thing that comes out of Warner Brothers has been the Godzilla Kong series, with another movie being added to the list. I'm a little surprised that the Meg has not snuck its way in there.
Really?
Because, well, what's the new premise? Is Kong and Godzilla come from a world beneath the world.
Right.
And the Meg comes from the depths of the Mariana Trench. So it's like one of those things where it's like they could cross paths at some point, and I'm not going to be shocked if they keep making them and then somehow they sneak the Meg in there. I haven't watched.
I just want to point out, when we're talking about special effects budgets, that as you're saying those words, the two of you are flicking in and out of the picture.
Oh.
So you should have spent a little bit more time on that.
There you go.
We're hoping AI either fixes it or what do you call it? Steve set up there, Captain Steve Coates. I mean, that's ideally where we want to go with this. This one of the first times we're trying video, so yeah, I know I'm fading into the mist every now and then.
Yeah.
Going back and forth. But
we're not used to having to sit still.
No.
I'm
very Italian. I'm always going like this, like I'm always stirring the pot of sauce or whatever.
Is that what that is?
I don't know.
Yeah.
They just say when you're speaking on something like a podcast, everybody's Italian.
Well, on this episode, you're mixing the chum. So, I don't think you have to mix. I don't think you have to mix the chum before you toss it in the water. I think it just goes right in.
Now, Steve Alten, you said you were happy with the first Meg film. What about the second?
I'll reserve my comments for right now.
That's fair.
There were a lot of great things about it, but there were some things that I wish would have been done a little bit better.
Was it true in any way to your second novel?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, I can't imagine what it's like to be an author, to see your work being translated and then put onto a screen. I mean, was it difficult the first time you watched like the first Meg, or were you excited? Or I don't want to spoil too much if that's big in your autobiography either.
Yeah.
I mean, it was exciting. Yeah, it was definitely exciting, and it was very well done, the first one. And I grew to appreciate that more after seeing the second one.
Okay.
Now the first one is really outstanding, and the second one needs a few clicks here and there. Fix it up a little bit.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I actually have the exact same feelings about. I haven't read the book yet. Your book is on my list because I do really want to read it, because I have heard a lot of great things about the whole series, actually. But yeah, I really enjoyed the first Meg movie now, especially after seeing the second one, because there was definitely some things that so I'm actually more interested in reading the second book now, because I really want to see what direction you were going in.
All right, so we know now. Like I watched the Meg, just don't watch Meg 2. That's right?
Well, I didn't say that.
No, I just it's harder for me because I don't come from a place like when I was a kid, like Shark Week wasn't the biggest thing to me, you know, like Jaws I didn't see till much later in life. So when we were younger, like we've watched horror movies pretty much our entire life. So when Jaws always popped up as like the scariest moment in horror films or like the scariest horror movie, I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? You know, like, so I'm coming from a completely different place than you three. So it's strange to me like I'm experiencing a lot of this stuff for the first time, this whole shark culture. Now my son, he likes sharks, so we put on the Shark Week thing and he enjoys that. You know, I've watched Jaws and I've watched the Meg. I've done all this stuff since he was born.
Now you're in.
Now I'm in.
Yes. I'll be working on you because then maybe you'll get into the Sharknado world when it just let's go off the rails.
Yeah. Steve Coates. I don't usually have much patience for like the Sharknado type stuff, but I do realize that it is a segment of cinema that people have come to enjoy, so much so that they've now made a bunch of them. So I guess, what are your thoughts from the serious to the action-packed to the horror to now kind of the ridiculous? I guess just your overview, if you're someone that enjoys that kind of cinema, floor's yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the interesting thing about like sharksploitation in general is like there's kind of like all these other little subgenres within it, because like you look at movies like Jaws and The Shallows or The Reef, Open Water, those are a little bit more like quote unquote realistic. So if you're, more into realism, then those movies are for you. If you're more into action adventure, then movies like The Meg or Deep Blue Sea. And there's even, some movies that people have never heard of, like Sky Sharks. Like, who's ever heard of Sky Sharks? Nobody's out there. I have it on Blu-ray because, of course, I do. But like, it's got Nazi zombies, flying sharks. I mean, what more do you really need, right? Like, so there's a lot of different areas, and it just depends on like your personal taste, like how much nonsense can you take. And I think also like kind of sometimes knowing like what you're in for before you go into it is exciting. But I also love going into a lot of these movies completely blind. I'll kind of just see a poster and a title and be like, all right, here we go. And I'm not going to read anything else about it. And then I've been pleasantly surprised quite a few times. Like there was a sci-fi movie directed by Griff First called Ghost Shark. Absolutely ridiculous title and premise, but it was entertaining as hell, and I really enjoyed it. Like, it's a movie, it sounds like you really shouldn't enjoy that much, but I had a blast watching it, and that had like a very like mid-range budget. But there was also a little bit of gore and things like that. So I mean, you have to kind of talk to yourself, be like, hey, how much gore do I want? How much of this do I want? Because there is a wide range of like when it comes to shark movies. Like it's absolutely wild. It's like the Wild West with shark movies. Like they're just throwing sharks onto everything. Mummy Shark, Sharkenstein, Sharkula, like you name it, there's a shark movie about it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think maybe a decade ago was when, a little more than that, when the Sci-Fi Channel really figured out how to balance the absurd concepts that they were getting with entertainment. And that's where I think Sharknado works, because you have, what's his name, the dude Ian Ziering.
Oh, 90210 guy. Yeah.
Like throwing in names from the past, mixed in with that, promoting it on like other channels. I think for either Sharknado 2 or 3, they had the show Z Nation that I also watched, where they had a zombie tornado in that as to promote Sharknado. And they're absurd, but they're fun. And maybe like talking about that, maybe this leads us into that top shark movie list. If you wouldn't mind, Captain Steve Coates. And let's see where else can we go with like the shark films, because I don't want to go too off the rails just yet.
Okay.
But let's like stay. Where's the wheelhouse of shark movies? And from you, Captain Steve Coates, your top 3 shark movies.
Okay, so I think like my top 3 of all time that I think are just like really solid, well-made movies. Are Jaws obviously would be like the number 1. Deep Blue Sea is number 2. Wow. 3, if I'm going for something that I really enjoy and are entertained by, I would have to say The Shallows.
Okay.
All right.
Solid. I have not seen The Shallows. I think I saw it I saw it on my couch, but Still enjoyed that one too.
Interesting. Yeah. The Shallows is one that I am not familiar with. I remember when I was working one of the jobs, somebody had an Open Water poster.
Open Water had a pretty solid.
Was that any good?
Run in theaters.
Open Water.
It's very much it's people floating in water, and then there's like the threat of sharks around them. Like we see something very similar with Something in the Water that just came out recently. So it's very much like that, but they do mix in real shark footage, like kind of with the actors, so it looks like they're all kind of interacting together, which is really cool. So it's not like a action-packed adventure movie; it's more survival drama, I guess you could say. So yeah, it's pretty entertaining. It's well done, but it just depends on if that's your cup of tea or not.
Yeah, and Open Water was big on based on a true story of the divers who got, I mean, because it follows the same plot, but
okay.
What happened to them? What was it like? And that's what the movie was trying to capture.
Oh,
and it's up to you. I mean,
they probably died.
I think the marketing for it made it seem like it was going to be more involved, but if you're not into a slower movie, then you're not gonna you're not gonna enjoy it.
All right, so Captain Steve, Jaws, Deep Blue Sea, and The Shallows. Mr. Alten, your top 3 shark films.
I was just making a note to myself to create a character called Captain Coates and have him killed.
Oh no! You can only hear this.
It would be an honor, actually.
This is great. Like, you can only get this on the Red River Horror Podcast. But Steve, all right. Well, that'll be in the 8th book, right? Or no, you're on to something else. The Meg is finished after 7, right?
Correct.
All right. So what do you got? What are your top 3 shark movies?
I go with the Meg as number 1.
Yay!
Special effects, everything considered, it doesn't get any better than that. I mean, they really did a great job with the special effects, and you had your hero, and he did a nice job, and
it's your baby on the IMAX. You know what I mean? It's pretty cool.
Yep. I'd say Jaws second, and what was the one with the girl who was stuck on that little coral reef? I forget the name.
The Shallows.
Shallows. Yeah.
Wow. All right, so we know. So at least this has been helpful for me.
Well, Ed, you got to watch The Shallows now.
I got to watch The Shallows, right? Because I've seen Jaws, I've seen Deep Blue Sea, I've seen The Meg, I have not seen The Shallows. So that's whenever someone asks me what my top 5 shark movies are going to be, those 4 are going to be included. All right.
I mean, it's a good list. You're not going to have a bad night watching either one of those.
No.
I mean, that's what it's all about.
And now it's time to have some fun. So, the Discovery Channel 2023 Shark Week, they actually played out Jaws versus the Meg. And we're not, spoiler alert. What happened in the end was the Meg won, but the Meg is also extinct. And they say that is because, so if a Meg were to fight a great white shark, the Meg would ultimately win just by sheer size and bite and all that stuff, right? But the problem is, they say that the great white shark is the reason why the Megalodon went extinct. So
no, not even close.
All right, so I guess we'll start with you, Steve Alten. So now we have Jaws versus the Meg. Your take on it. Who wins?
Great whites and Carcharodon Megalodon were around the same time. So were Orca. Orca was the immediate danger to Megs.
Yep.
Because they hunt in packs. And so a pack of orca could take down a single Meg. But the weakness with the orca is that it's an air breather. So if the Megs went deep, aka the Mariana Trench, that would be a good reason to go deep, then the threat doesn't exist.
So that's why they would need to be deep.
All right.
Because orcas are still probably the biggest threat to great whites. Is that correct? I think it is. Like where they can take them down pretty quick because of that pack mentality.
Orca love eating the great white's liver.
That's right.
Wow. I didn't know. So this is a serious whale.
Oh yeah, don't mess with those.
Wow.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
the Free Willy's all cute and everything, but no, they're killers.
Damn.
Like, literally,
All right.
they'll mess you up good.
Okay. Yikes. All right. So just to clarify, you say the Meg beats the Great White.
Oh, that's a snack. Come on, that's a snack.
All right, Captain Steve Coates. What do you think? The Meg versus the Great White. Who do you have?
The Meg for sure. I mean, just sheer size and whatnot, and I mean the speed of it too. Just in comparison to the Great White, just because it's so big, must have been incredible. I mean, I don't know. I just can't picture a Great White. If it was a pack of Great Whites, maybe, but if we're talking one-on-one, then no, the Meg has got it for sure.
All right. So according to our unscientific, whatever we're doing here, the Meg is up 2. Joe, what do you think? Who wins, Great White or the Meg?
Well, I'm taking Team Meg because, especially thinking about, when they're saying in the Discovery Channel version, they're saying that the Great Whites ate the food supply or
Correct.
quicker to get the food supply. Mm-hmm. But just based on size alone, I mean, could the Great White could turn into a megalodon food supply itself?
Right. All right.
So I gotta go with the big one.
All right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
What else? I had something else as far as that goes. Oh, is there any underrated shark? Do you think that, and I know, and Steve Coates, I don't want to be, disrespectful toward the whole nature of everything. Like, I want to make sure, we're protecting these great beasts. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want people to start being like, oh, well, no, I got to go out and kill some orcas or sharks or anything like that. I'm not promoting any of that. I just, in the movie, in the fictional space that we're in, what we love, yeah. I love these hypothetical battles.
We got to get outside of the Great White and Megalodon space for
yes.
a second. Yeah.
Yes. So, Steve Coates, is there anything we're underestimating? Do you think that there is a shark out there that you've seen, whether in cinema or in real life, that could take the Meg or the Great White?
I mean, yeah, even in Deep Blue Sea, it wasn't Great White sharks, right? They were Mako sharks. Mm-hmm. And then even in the more recent Under Paris, again, that was another Mako shark. And then there was the movie that came out after Jaws, Mako, The Jaws of Death. So I guess it's one a lot of people maybe don't think about, but I mean, like, they're super fast. They're pretty scary looking. So yeah, I like seeing when they pop up in movies.
They
one
taste good
shark
too.
Yeah. And like one shark I'm tired of seeing in some movies, again, it's a lot of lower budget movies, but it's like the bull shark, because they're like, oh, it can swim in fresh water and seawater. So like that's just a catalyst for like a lot of movies and whatnot. So I get a little tired of seeing that one, but like I think the Mako could be a little bit more prominent.
All right, so I'm learning a lot. Mako sharks and orcas. Don't mess with either of those.
I mean, we eat Makos. I mean,
do we?
Yeah.
Oh.
You can get them on a menu. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
They're pretty not bad.
I've never had a Mako shark. All right. Steve Alten, is there anything in your studies, anything that informed your work that you came across that you read about that could probably take on the Meg or the Great White?
I am introducing a prehistoric Mako in MEG Purgatory. And so there'll be a lot about that in there.
Wow.
They're big and they were nasty. And they could take down a Meg.
Damn, so this Mako shark in the orca...
There we go.
I am just... Wow, I'm blown away.
There we go. Well, that's fun.
Yes, yeah. Very fun.
Yeah.
There's also the big creature is also in MEG Purgatory, the Titanoboa.
What's a Titan? I'm not familiar with the Titanoboa. Yeah. So is it?
That's a like 100-foot boa constrictor.
Nice. So we're saying one that's big enough that it could wrap up something the size of the Meg.
Yeah.
All right. So Legendary should be consulting you about. Uh-oh. Don't worry, guys. We'll wrap up. We'll wrap up. I don't get
Yeah.
Like someone who's authored literally like a whole collection about like this great prehistoric beast. Somebody who's watched all of the shark films. I can't tap into that knowledge because he only likes Jaws. So no, I'm just kidding.
No, I mean I'm
kidding.
I'm a nature documentary person too, so I always enjoy those. Tiger sharks actually are ones that scare me more than any other.
Really?
Yeah, well, because they'll kind of cruise around really quick and they'll bite quick and run quick. I don't know why. That's just the one that really sticks out to me. And then outside of that, it's still one of the coolest things that they reference in Jaws. And my brother got to experience it, not me. He was in South Africa and did the shark dive in the Indian Ocean and said it's no joke that with great whites, they are looking at you. Like they're definitely studying what are you before they get, you can see them. Their eyes they're looking at you.
Okay.
Like not just like up and down, but like he could see it like looking like pupil to pupil. Like
Yeah.
this thing's staring at me.
That's pretty terrifying.
That's pretty terrifying.
Yeah. All right, so I guess to bring it home on the shark entertainment front, first of all, you have to listen to the Bucket of Chum podcast because we only did a cursory overview. I got to the favorites. But Steve Coates, if you could give us, I guess, you've seen so many of them. What are some honorable mentions? So obviously we have Jaws, Deep Blue Sea, The Shallows, The Meg. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you've either seen all of those or you're going to see all of those now. But what are we missing? Give me like 2 or 3 that we're missing that you really need to check out.
So again, this all depends on your level of entertainment you want to have. But some of the ones I enjoyed, I've mentioned Ghost Shark. That is an absolute blast. One that I had an absolute blast watching, and it's super ridiculous. There's not even technically a shark in it. It's called Robo Shark. And again, it's another sci-fi movie. Again, just pure nonsense, ridiculous. Just, turn your brain off, flip that switch, and don't look too much into it. But and I mentioned it earlier too, but Sky Sharks and Graveyard Shark, one I just did, independent movies like that. Just some ones that we haven't mentioned yet, but those are ones I would definitely check out.
Okay, Ghost Shark, Robo Shark, Sky Shark, Graveyard Shark. No, I mean, this is good because the thing is there's always interest gets really high around Shark Week every single year.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
great.
it did. I would say since my son was born and I watched Jaws, like since then it's just like, all right, I'm in. Like I can do this. I can do the shark movie thing. Like I can, because like for me it's like Halloween all the time. But then you do get into the dog days of summer and you're like, crap, I need something.
Look in the water.
And everybody is always so animated about Shark Week. Yeah. So this is exciting. I have some homework to do and some film to watch. Steve Alten, so you have seven in the Meg Legacy collection. Just so happy you joined us as well. meglegacy.com. I guess some of your thoughts in parting for this podcast today. What do you have for the shark lover out there? What do you have on the horizon? What can we look forward to?
Well, I have a whole new thing going with different series called Sea Monster Cove High School. So if you go to seamonstercovehs.com, you can get on this site and you can actually go cage diving with a pair of 40-foot prehistoric Magos.
Very cool. Yeah, we're going to be doing that.
seamonstercovehs.com.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Guess anything else? Captain Steve, anything else in parting today?
If you could show the podcast some love, you can find me anywhere you get podcasts, bucketofchumpodcast.com. All my social links are there. And there's a Patreon too. I do an episode a month over there right now. Patreon.com/bucketofchum. And I usually just do sometimes just a random aquatic horror. For July, I'm doing Waterworld. Last month I did a movie about Loch Ness. So yeah, all kinds of cool stuff going on over there.
Excellent. Loch Ness, that's something we have to dive into too.
100%.
When I was a kid, the Loch Ness Monster was huge.
Yeah, no. Definitely good.
Read the Loch. I wrote that. It's a
prequel, right?
What's that?
Is the Loch is it some semi prequel for the Meg?
No, different series completely.
Okay.
The Loch is about Loch Ness.
The Loch.
Yeah, I'm writing the third one right now. The Loch, Heaven Lake, but it'd be a 3-book series.
Sweet.
Well, Joe, I have a lot of homework to do. I have a lot of media to consume. I have a whole notepad. Look at this. I don't know if it's not going to show up, of course. Yeah, we don't have the budget for that. I have my notepad. So anyway, with that, Joe, I'm good. I'm excited. This was a great Red River Horror launch into the water as far as sharks go. I'm digging more than just Jaws and the Meg now. I'm very excited.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's tons of content out there. It's all very entertaining. Highly recommend. I have a copy of the Meg, the book that I started, so I'm going to continue to read that and probably continue to read the rest of the series as well, which is very exciting. So big thanks to Steve Alten for being here. Big thanks to Steve Coates of the Bucket of Chum podcast for being here. This has been episode number 110 of the Red River Horror Podcast. And remember to keep traveling those channels of fear.